What's up, Evil Dead fans? We're going to go over on how to make a screen accurate Evil Dead 2 cup, whether it's for a flat top or it's for the raised top. Just a few things that you're going to need. We're not going to talk about what we need for the actual cuff piece right now, but just some of the tools you'll need is you'll need various grits of sandpaper. You're going to need your nuts and bolts. You're going to need a pair of scissors. You're going to need 10 snips. You're going to need a Dremel tool with cutting blades. And possibly, depending on what you're using to cut your metal, if you're using metal, you're going to need a air compressor with a die grinder attachment. If I forgot anything, what I'll do is and your nuts and bolts, of course, I will go over that during this video. All right, so the first thing you want to do, you want to make sure you have your cuff attachments already on your body. Just remember, if you're doing a raised top, you're going to have your attachment up here. If you're doing the flat top, you're going to want it down here. This is all just sitting loose. You can see it's, there's a gap. It's just sitting here right now. But you want your attachments exactly where you want them to be. Next thing is the clamp. You're going to have to go out and get a clamp like this. This is what is considered a Spectre-3 clamp. This one will adjust to 3.5 inches or bigger. So that's really what you're going to need. If you go pick one up, they're about $7, and this one's already been done. So as you can see, it's already been drilled. But yeah, usually some hardware stores will have these, or you can order one online. Some of them do have this little piece here that actually sits in here. You're going to want to use needle nose pliers. I didn't cover that. You want needle nose pliers and just pull that off. You don't need it. And they come with a locked nut. You don't want that either. You want just another nut that you can adjust. Because locked nuts have some kind of plastic inside of it that will actually lock in place. So you do not want that. Once they're locked in place, it's hard for them to get off. So you want to pop that off, and this is what you want right here. Of course, the holes won't be drilled in it yet. Okay, so this is the part where I show you what I made mine out of. Now, you can use anything. You can use a cup. You can use a plastic tube. It really just depends on what you have, but this is what you're really looking for. What I used was a coffee can, aluminum coffee can. As you can see, this has already been cut out. But if you look right here, those little ridges, right here to here, it is perfect. The indentation is perfect. But the one thing that you want to make sure, and the reason why you want the clamp already, is to make sure it's the right width. Because if it's too big, it looks funky. If it's too small, it's too small. So what you want to do is you want to mark out all the way around the can with a black marker. Exactly where you want to do your cut. Now, the side that's facing the chainsaw body, this is just kind of off, I just put this on here real quick, is a little bit wider. About a 1/16 of an inch wider over here, the side that's going to be facing your chainsaw body. On the other side, the one that's going to be facing you, it is just about a 1/16 of an inch over from the edge. So this one will be about 1/8 of an inch over, and this one will be a 1/16 of an inch. Now, when you do cut it, let's cut the nearest side to the end first. Now, I wouldn't suggest clamping these down with a vise. I would use hand clamps on a bench. So you do not mar up the metal if you're doing it with a coffee can or any kind of metal, because you don't want a flat spot in it. So use hand clamps where you can, especially spring-loaded ones. Those ones do help. And remember, when you do your first cut, let's say you get one side say it's the side facing the chainsaw body. You may get a little wonky with your cut, and you cut a little too deep. Just remember, you're going to be cutting a lot of this away, but if it looks really wonky, use that as your close side, and then do your other cut as your wider side. So remember, you're going to be trimming a lot away, and if you screw up one side, say if you go for your wider side first and it's a little too narrow, you can make that your side that's narrow, and then make the other one that's just a little bit wider. But yeah, and also, since this is already a cylinder shape, actually bending this is much easier than, say, if it was a flat piece of metal, since it's already got the indentions in it and the curvatures. Aluminum, we won't have to use a roller to roll it in place to make it more rounded. So it's going to be a lot easier. So this is what I used, and what you do, like I said, cut here all the way around, and I'll show you the next step. Okay, I'm just going to use this as an example. This is the very top of the can, which I wouldn't use in the first place, but don't get rid of it. Trust me, don't get rid of it. The next step that you want to do is you want to cut a slit all the way across. Basically cut it right here. And then you want to slowly bend it. You want to, and not bend it so much as you want to round it. Now it's nice if you have a tube that is similar in circumference for what you need. Start wrapping it around it till it starts to actually form. Now it may spring a little bit, but if it can fit inside of your cuff, if you know your adjustment size with your cuff, you can start to slowly trim away access pieces until it starts to fit inside of there. And this is what I have left right here. Now, once you know you can fit it inside of your cuff, the next thing you want to do, you want to make sure it touches all the edges on the inside when you place it on the inside. You want to make sure that you have just enough to the point where exactly you want it. You want a little bit right here on the bottom, just a little bit past this piece right here, and a little bit past this piece up here. And right after you do that, you want to start to sand down any excess burrs from your cuts. You can do that before if you want to, but it's easier when you actually start to get your piece formed. So yeah, you want to just take all the burrs away when you do this, because you're going to be constantly fitting your hand inside and you don't want to cut your hand up. The next step after that is you want to find your center across from your opening. And then you can use your snips or your die grinder. If you're using aluminum, do not use an air tool because it will mar it up. And when cutting your can, do not use snips because it can dent it and put little marred bends in it that will ruin the look. So use a Dremel or an air tool when cutting the aluminum can. Do not use snips. But for this here, you can cut with snips. Remember, you want to find your center over here, mark it across so it looks screen accurate. Don't cut it in half. It will be a pain in the butt to actually form being cut in half. But after you do that, you snip it out, and say if it bends it just a little bit here, just use your needle nose pliers and just bend it back very gently since it is aluminum. You can even use the snips to trim this area here if you want to, but remember, you may bend these little edges just a little bit, but it's aluminum and it will bend back very easy. If you're using a harder steel, you're going to want to use your die grinder. If you're using actually something from plastic, like a cup or a tube that's thin enough, you could get away with snips or scissors. So let's get to the next step. Okay, so now we have the piece inside the strap here, and it's just sitting loose. You're going to be able to slide it over. Remember, like I said, this one has already been pre-drilled because I finished it up already. You can see that the outer strap covers up that connecting piece right there. We will put an inner strap to make it look right. And this is what you want so far. One suggestion is you're going to constantly be taking this piece in and out. This inner piece is going to be constantly taken in and out. You see there's a little bit of black on the threads. You can barely see it. I marked where I want to have my height to put my hand in, because you're going to constantly be loosening this up and then putting it back on, so you can get this inner piece out. And you will notice it's not touching the edges, but when we bolt it down, it will be touching the edges. Now, let's get to the part of putting the holes in on this part. Now, you always want to start with the top. You may have to flatten this out a little bit, this actual cuff piece, this connector. because of that top bracket wants to sit all wonky. So the first thing you do is you sit it in place exactly where the cuff needs to go and where you want it on here. You mark your hole through the bracket that's on your body right there. Then you take it apart again, because you don't want to drill this together, because this metal is quite hard. This strap is really hard metal. You want to put it into a vise and you want to drill your hole. Make sure you use a pilot bit first so your drill doesn't dance all over your strap. So once you drill that, you put the inner piece back in exactly where you want it, and then, see, it's not lined up right now, but you can see. Then you mark that, and you actually want to do what I call a freehand drill. Do not put this aluminum in a vise because it will bend, it will mar, and the vise will crush it. So what you want to do, and have some parental supervision and wear some gloves, is hold it with one hand, and you want to pilot hold this. One hand like this. Make sure your finger's not in the way of the hole, and then drill through the hole here. And then you have your hole. After that, put a nut and bolt through here. Mark your other next spot. You want to make sure it's flush. Mark your next spot. Do the same thing. Take it out, drill this, and then once that's drilled, put it back in, put the bolt back in here, and then do the freehand drill with that all the way around. Now, the reason why you're putting a bolt in each hole when you're doing it free-handed is so you don't screw up. It's held in place. You don't want to hold way over to the side one way. You don't want it way over this way. It just helps keep it in place. So this is what you'll have when you're done. So remember, start with the top, then go to this one, then go to this one, and then go to this one. I didn't do a single strap on the bottom. I did a dual strap on the bottom just because of the way it fits, and I'll show you guys that at the end of the video. So let's get to the inner strap. Now, once you've got this part done, you can put it completely on your chainsaw and take a look at it, make sure everything sits right and it's exactly where you want it to be. A little piece of metal in there, just gotta take it out. And remember I said don't get rid of this. And the reason for that is you can make your inner strap with it. I actually use a different piece of metal I had to make it, but you can actually make it out of this. And don't get rid of your scrap from this piece, because what you'll need to do, it's easier if you do it like this. You get a tape measure, a ruler, you measure this inner diameter here, and then you draw your line all the way around where you need it, and then you cut it, and then you do the same kind of trimming away method as this, except you don't trim as much away. You want to do a full circumference with it, and then you end up with this. You do the same process with drilling the holes. Without taking the strap off, you can actually just put that in, do one hole free-handed drilling, drill it, put a bolt through it, back through it. Do the same thing on the next one, same thing on the next one, same thing on the next one. Do not dance around from hole to hole. Don't do this one, then do this one, because you can have a big gap between the pieces here. So let's put this together and then take a look at it. All right, so once you got your inner strap in and everything's sitting where it wants to be, where you need it to be, it's done. It's ready to be installed back in your chainsaw, but before you do that, make sure that all the burrs off the edges are gone, because they will catch your hand. That's one of the final things you need to do before final installation. Paint it however you want. One thing you can do is, you'll notice my inner strap stops here instead of here. The reason why I didn't have it stop here is because I didn't want a piece of metal sticking out to jab me in the hand. So that's why I didn't do that. You can do that. If you want something to jab you in the hand, that's fine. And remember, these bolts are going to be replaced. They're just here for mock-up. I never put on my final bolts until it's final installation. But as you can see, it turned out very, very nice. It sits like this, so everything's in the right placement. And when you place it on your chainsaw, some people, they have it lower than the top. Some people have it higher than the top. This one will be in the exact spot where it needs to go. When I make my next video on the final chainsaw, I'll show you where it sits and how it looks. And another thing, once you actually put all three of these pieces together, you'll notice when you work with the coffee can part, you'll notice that that metal is quite soft. And you need to be very gentle with curving that. But you'll notice when it's all together, it turns out pretty rigid and hard. Now, I'm not saying it won't bend, because it could end up bending. You never know. So just be very gentle with it. Treat it like you would treat anything else, nice and gentle, or just don't be rough with it. I wouldn't be rough with this. Like, I wouldn't throw it on the floor, basically. But you can, do whatever like that. It ain't gonna hurt it. And it's not going to, since it is in a circle now, it's not going to bend down. So it's rigid, but yet you gotta remember to treat it right. And also, remember guys, just find something that has the right curvatures and bends to make that cuff look correct for Evil Dead 2. Like I said, if you find a piece of tubing, a cup, anything like that, that can work. It just changes up on what you use to cut it. You can use a harder metal, like I said. And one thing I gotta tell you is this bolt is not screen accurate. That will be replaced. It's just here for mock-up. Or this nut, I'm sorry. And let's go over the price, how much I spent. I spent $7 on the cuff strap here. Let's say, I'm not going to include the tools in here. Let's say if you're going to do this method with a coffee cup, or coffee can, sorry. The strap, nuts and bolts, and say you got to buy some sandpaper maybe. It's about $10 altogether. $10 to do that. And for the coffee can, if you don't have one, the metal coffee cans are getting harder and harder to find. Most of the time they make plastic ones. So your best bet, if you want to go with the coffee can method, go to your grandma's house, go to your uncle's house, go to your dad's house, whoever has a shop. I guarantee they'll have a coffee can somewhere with nuts and bolts and things like that in there. Just remember, follow the steps on making sure the width here is correct with the strap. But really, that's it. And like I said, final installation. We'll show you guys final installation when the video was, or not the video, but when I do a video on the completion of my chainsaw. Till next time, you guys stay groovy.